Let's bring in our reporters and analysts. MS Now senior Capitol Hill reporter and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale, the Los Angeles Times investigative reporter Ben Weider, and MS Now political analyst, Republican strategist Susan Del Percio, and Democratic strategist Basil Smikle. Ali, these announcements really dropped just hours apart, maybe even within that time frame. Walk us through how this escalated so quickly.
Hours apart and well before lawmakers even got back to town, Anna, because remember, many of these allegations for Congressman Swalwell happened during the time that Congress was still on recess. And so really it was a reality reading from Swalwell and then Gonzalez of the fact that their colleagues in bipartisan fashion were already looking at ways that they could take a rare step to actually vote and expel them from Congress. The reason that it's rare is because there is a pervasive view here on both sides that an expulsion vote undoes the will of the voters who sent these people to Congress to represent them. Of course, the big issue here is that in many cases, these voters had no idea of the level of seriousness of these allegations or even that these allegations existed in the first place. And so both of these members saw that they were likely coming back to be expelled at some point this week and quickly showed themselves the exit. I also think that it's important and a sign of the political times and the ways that politics and accountability ride side by side in this Washington, the way that this doesn't change the balance of power in the House. Margins were always a central concern. It's why when Gonzalez's allegations back in March first came up, he said, I'm not going to run for re-election, but he was going to finish out his House term. Now there is a bipartisan clamoring because of the seriousness of the Swalwell allegations and the Gonzalez allegations, certainly, but then also the fact that both of these members leaving means it's one Republican and one Democrat, and that's the political reality to this as well.
What happens to the House ethics investigations into these two men?
Yeah, that was a question that I was actually asking this morning on my show. We know that it goes away, but in my conversation with Congressman Suhas Subramaniam, one of the Democrats on the Ethics Committee, I want to play for you just a part of my conversation because it goes away, but there's a long tail here. Watch what he told me.
So, they're resigning, but, it really undermines trust in Congress generally when you have members who are in very public scandals like this. And our job on the Ethics Committee is to try to restore that trust.
But now that they've resigned, don't the investigations from an ethics perspective go away?
They do. Now, from a criminal perspective, obviously, prosecutors like the one in Manhattan can do whatever they need to do. But from an ethics perspective, they're no longer in our jurisdiction.
So that's important because as former members, and again, they have to officially resign, so we're waiting to see that today. But from a member perspective, ethics investigations go away when you are no longer a member. There's a rare instance of a report still being released when it was Matt Gaetz being put up for Attorney General, if you remember, just a few years ago. But generally speaking, especially in an instance like Swalwell, where the investigation was just announced, just getting underway, that now stops from a congressional perspective. But it's important when we think about the long tail, where this could go if more accusations are leveled publicly. That gives prosecutors, district attorneys, for example, in places like Manhattan, the ability to say, OK, let's dig in here. Is there something that I can prosecute? And that's an open question.
Ben, you have been covering this whole Swalwell scandal and allegations. His position certainly unraveled quickly under the mounting pressure as these allegations surfaced in the last few days. What kind of pressure was he facing from his Democratic colleagues? And do both departures now turn up the pressure on these other lawmakers under scrutiny who may be facing other types of misconduct allegations?
I think that once the allegations came out on Friday, it was very quick that you saw people turning around. And I think that's the credit for that has to go to the reporting that brought out these allegations. The San Francisco Chronicle first reported on the allegations of a former staffer and the rigor that report brought, an extensively corroborated account. It was very hard to really pick any holes in it. I mean, Swalwell, as a former prosecutor, would presumably appreciate the rigor that reporting brought to detailing this account. And so pretty quickly, it was clear to all of his colleagues that this was a very legitimate allegation, that it had been extensively well documented. Other women very quickly came forward as well to express their own allegations of misconduct. And so it was remarkably fast. I mean, from a reporting perspective, it felt like every couple minutes there was another politician coming out and condemning his actions. And then very quickly, first calling on him to drop out of the California gubernatorial race, and then later calling on him to drop out of Congress.
Basil Swalwell seemed to be a rising star in the Democratic Party. He was considered the lead candidate, according to the polls, in the California governor's race. He had endorsements of some of the big party's power players like Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Right. And when these allegations surfaced, certainly Democrats were kind of quick to detach themselves, to call out the wrongdoing that was alleged here. How do you think the party handled this?
Well, I mean, I think they were right to do exactly what you said. They stepped away very quickly. The unions did. The independent expenditures that were supporting him stepped away also. Yeah, I think Democrats like to believe that we are better at self-policing. And so I think it was important that they acted quickly, especially if you're going to be pointing fingers at other people, namely Donald Trump.
I mean, there are questions, though, about who knew what when.
Well, that's why, actually, I think it is important, to Ali's reporting earlier, that Congress actually continues some kind of investigation, because it also involves their staffers. So if you think about it, as an employer, you want to get to the bottom of how of the treatment of your own staff. And so that's why I do think it's important that these investigations continue, but I think everyone that needed to act quickly did so, and clearly it's pushed him to act as well.
And there was bipartisan condemnation when it came to Swalwell. There's, I guess, bipartisan condemnation of Gonzalez, but Republicans handled that situation differently, because the Gonzalez stuff had surfaced weeks ago, at the very least, not months ago, and Republicans were a little less emphatic about what needed to happen in that case.
Some Republicans
right?
did speak out, though. There were some that did speak out. And
but they weren't calling for his ouster in a large way. They weren't ready to vote on his expulsion.
No, leadership was not, although there were some rank and file who were. And to that point, they did not act as swiftly and the way the Democrats did. But Ali pointed out in her reporting earlier, it really was a vote issue. And it does show where I think both sides originally, I think the Democrats didn't want to necessarily see Swalwell leave before the end of his term for that reason. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was some backdoor negotiation going on, saying that, or conversations, maybe not negotiations, that we'll let both of them go. This is probably a good thing that both should leave and leave the vote count where it is. There is one thing on the ethics investigation that I like to highlight is, if any member chooses to work their way back into office, which there has been situations where they do want to make a comeback if they are proven innocent or proven not guilty, or get their name back, or somehow find redemption, that investigation opens up. And an ethics investigation will happen if Swalwell or Gonzalez or anyone else does try and seek and win office again. So that is there as something to kind of keep in check. But at the end of the day, you know, I kept hearing, like, how did Swalwell think he could get away with it? We have to keep in mind that this has been happening, and people have been thinking they could get away with it for a long, long time. And credit to the women who say, no, you're not going to get away with it. Even if it may happen, you may not find your voice until several years later. It's important that women always find their voice.